Welcome to the 3 Knockdown Rule. Starring Mario Lopez and Steve Kim. Presented by Hustler Casino and UFC Fight Pass.
Ladies and gentlemen, the 3 Knockdown Rule is in effect on UFC Fight Pass. I'm Steve Kim, joined by Mario Viva Mexico Lopez. It's the return of Canelo. Big show this week there.
I'm glad you have a moniker for me this week. I'm also glad we both got the memo to wear our green shirts. So there's good for that's good indication of the show to come. Shout out to Smoking Tim Frazier here and
Tino on the edits. All right, the bout sheet for this week's show: the Big Bang, Zhang with another big victory. Then we preview that man we talked about. Canelo Alvarez takes on Charlo, and then joining us on the championship hotline, the legend himself, Jim Lampley. Then we have Ask Mario and Final Flurries. But before we get started, we want to let you know this podcast is sponsored by Hustler Casino, located in Gardena, California, just 20 minutes from downtown LA. Check out the latest promo, So Fine Sundays, where they're giving away tons of cash. Beat the stadium traffic and play your favorite games at Hustler Casino. For more info, go to hustlercasino.com.
Also, shout out to our homies right here in Hollywood, the Scout Micro LA. They offer a unique and innovative hair loss solution for men. They specialize in a thing called SMT, which basically restores and replicates the exact shape and size of a hair follicle by tattooing tiny particles of pigment into the scalp, giving the illusion of hair. You can see results in as little as one treatment. It can restore a hairline, make your hair look thicker, more dense. If you're rocking it close, it's a really way to go. It can conceal any sort of scars or burns you may have. They use the highest qualities. So if you're going bald or just looking for a new look, call our homies over at Scout Micro LA and they will hook you up and mention this ad for a free consult.
If you're getting thin, he'll help fill you in. All right, let's get started.
Round 1.
This past Saturday from the Wembley Arena, Great Britain, bang. Again, Zhang, as expected, he only took half the time in banging out Joyce in 3. Mario, I think it's very simple now. The Big Bang, Zhang is an upper crust, upper echelon heavyweight.
I think he's got to be considered now one of the most dangerous and elite big men in the heavyweight division. And also someone you want to see when you see a big guy like that, which for me, that's the knockout of the year.
That one.
Give me another one.
Yeah.
Give me another one. That and the way, boom, and they're just the big guys. Knockout of the year. You got this big guy. You all of a sudden start playing fantasy in your mind like, ooh, him and Tyson Fury would be good. I don't know if Tyson Fury wants any part of that guy, but I'll tell you what, he made a major statement in getting it done in half the time like you just mentioned. And he's a guy who's you want to see him fight. And I think he's a major player now on the scene, and you can put him in there with Fury, Wilder, Usyk, and I think he'll hold his own. Look, we need characters in big men in the heavyweight division. He's checked off all the boxes. He ended the year on a high note. I would love to see him with all those guys I just mentioned.
As you said, he's big and strong and it can bang. He's 6'6", 280s.
That's a big dude.
And he's fluid and he's southpaw. And
Dude, that's a problem.
And what I loved about this fight was it wasn't just a left hand. He was a clean-up right hook. And so obviously he's evolving his skill. He's a much more relaxed fighter. And you take a look at the heavyweight landscape. Mario, the Ring Magazine, their champion is Alexander Usyk. Number 1 is Tyson Fury. Number 2 is Deontay Wilder. 3 is Joshua. Number 4 is Gillet. And then number 5 is Andy Ruiz. I would say against any of these guys that we just mentioned, he's no worse than a 2-1 underdog against anyone. And I would say against certain guys, either even money or a slight favorite.
Absolutely. And I'm glad he had the rematch, even though I think we were both a little reluctant to embrace it because we didn't seem that it didn't seem that it was warranted. But man, he just sort of proved that it wasn't a fluke and did it in even quicker fashion and really made a statement. He's on the scene. He's not to be ignored now.
Question with Joyce. Did he look like a guy that fell off a cliff? Because from the very beginning, he couldn't stop the left. And worse than that, I think his punch resistance is rubbed down to the nub.
Well, I don't know if he fell off or got shoved off. But he certainly, it wasn't one of his better nights. And he's going to have to do some long, hard thinking. in this off time right now.
And this is the thing about the rematch clauses. I get it that there's a monetary value to the fight. Maybe there was no other fight for him. But again, based on the way, and I'm not second guessing, I'm first guessing because I said this last week. If I was his management, I would have steered clear. I just think Zhang Zhilei is an incredibly difficult matchup. Joe Joyce is a plotter, and then out there's a perceptible loss of speed, reflexes, and quickness against a guy that can bang at that size and with that type of precision. It was a fait accompli what was going to happen here in the rematch. All right, moving ahead this weekend from the T-Mobile Arena in Viva Las Vegas, Showtime pay-per-view for the undisputed super middleweight championship of the world. It is the return of Saul Alvarez against Jermell Charlo. Mario, I have a question. What do Josh Taylor, Stephen Fulton, and Errol Spence all have in common with Jermell Charlo coming into this fight? Take a guess.
Well, they all are on a losing streak.
They all came in on a year-plus layoff.
They did, and I know where you're going. However, with that said, I think this is a fascinating matchup in the sense that, look, Canelo, and I should have prefaced it by saying, no one has a resume like him in the sport right now, and that's why I think he's the biggest star and remains number one when it comes to pay-per-view. However, there's been a lot of tread in those tires. And a lot of it has been because of these big matchups that he had and how many and how long he's been in the game. At some point, that wear and tear should take effect. Will it be Saturday night? I don't know. But my guy has had a few surgeries, and it's just kind of one of these, like you're wondering. He looks sharp in the gym on the pads. We obviously haven't been seeing him spar as of late. We know he prepares really hard. He's a disciplined fighter. But he's one of those guys where, like, he started so young and he's got so much mileage on him. At some point, you're going to have to see, because Father Time's undefeated, a little wear and tear. There's some miles are going to have to start coming off that curveball. Will that be enough this Saturday? Remains to be seen. He said recently he sees himself fighting for another few years. He feels great. A lot of fighters say that, though. We'll see. What I do know is with the time off with Charlo, that's still a young, twitchy, athletic guy who is hungry, even though he hasn't fought in about a year. And on paper, he is stylistically a bad matchup for Canelo. So, in Charlo's best case scenario, there's some wear and tear that finally comes to fruition on Canelo for Charlo. Charlo's raised up for this fight. He's going to use his athleticism and speed to maybe steal rounds, and then it could be one of the biggest upsets we've seen in a while. That is a scenario. However, I feel still the discipline, the experience, the power of Canelo, and just the savvy veteran that he is will be too much. But I think it'll be an intriguing fight.
I think the activity matters. I'm going to say it. I'm never changing my mind. And maybe this fight changes the recent trend. Timing, being in sync, and actually just getting hit and building up callus matters.
Absolutely.
And with Jermell Charlo, we are talking about a fighter. He's not just moving up in weight one class. He's moving up a full 2 weight classes. Now, I believe they said that the plan is to make sure that we're not really close to 168, but closer to the low 160s. In my view, Mario, you're right. Speed, quickness, and the twitch. Charlo's going to give him problems early on with the speed and quickness. But this is what I do remember. Even in the fights that he won against Brian Castano, then there was the draw. As athletic as Charlo is, I don't think he's slick. Everyone equates athleticism to slickness. Caleb Plant is slick.
Correct.
Charlo is fast and explosive. I think there's a difference.
And look what happened there. Look, in the Castano fights, good point. In the first fight, I think he tried to stand and bang with him a little bit. If he tries to do that with Canelo, that's going to be, I think, a short night for him. But he did make, I think, a really good adjustment in the second fight, and he showed me that he's willing to make adjustments. He's able to sort of not get stuck and complacent in a certain style.
Hit on the fly.
And he can hit on the fly. I agree with you as far as the activity. I just don't know if those other factors that I mentioned previously will have a bigger toll on the outcome. But I do find it a fascinating fight.
You know, and let's go back to May when Alvarez made his homecoming. Look, those homecomings can go different ways, as you said. Sometimes you could say it's exciting. Other times you could say it's very distracting. But in my view, the fact that Charlo is this fiery, blustery guy and a bigger name to the American audiences, this game is so mental. And it's my opinion that Canelo is probably more mentally in tune and motivated for this fight, okay, than he was against John Ryder, who was a tough plugger. Now, I don't know. You're right. Maybe he did lose an inch off his fastball. But the question is, again, Jermell Charlo is going to be really, really interesting to me because I do expect him to win some early rounds. The first time Canelo pops him really hard, and let's face it, this is going to be the best puncher that he may have faced, and there's a very good chance with these weigh-ins being up to 30 hours plus, he could be getting hit by a cruiserweight. You know the way these guys blow up in weight after the fight.
Yeah, but it is ironic. And when I saw them stand next to each other, Charlo, who you said's coming up to weight classes, looked like a much bigger fighter naturally.
Hold on. Taller?
Not just
bigger.
Not just taller, Cam. Not just taller and slender.
The width of the legs
No,
matters.
I know, but he's broad, bro.
He is.
When I saw him, he's broad.
In the upper body.
He's not a little guy.
But said the same thing for Fulton Inoue. One guy had the tree trunk legs. The other guy was a little bit broader and taller, and that was Fulton.
No, you're right. So that's what I'm saying. He's not a small man, is my point.
Yeah.
And he looks like he carries that weight well. And he looked filled out, and he's broad and stuff. So I don't think it's receiving the punches. I know, obviously, we don't know what to expect there. But it's not like we're seeing this guy come up who's a much, much smaller man. I think they're going to probably be close to probably about the same weight. I'm intrigued. I still like Canelo in the fight, but I think he'll have his moments, Charlo, and I'm intrigued to see how Canelo looks at this point in his career.
Yeah, and to me, if there's going to be any interest in a possible fight with Terrence Crawford, we do have to see a little bit more corrosion from Canelo, because in this game, timing is everything, as is the trajectory of career. Mario, you spoke about...
I'll be there, by the way.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to it, so I'm going to be able to report back in person, because as you know, sometimes it is a little different in person.
And with Canelo, you talk about his career path. Turned pro at age 15. So whatever age, I think he's like 33, 34. It's older than your usual garden variety 33, 34. But this is where I really
Which is still not young these days, but you're right.
Not when you have 64 fights.
No, that's what I'm talking about. But I'm saying, generally speaking, that's still pretty young, the way guys are taking care of themselves. But when you start that young and you have that much money, yes, of course, it's going to catch up to you.
Career record, 59-2-2 in an era when a lot of young fighters who I believe are really gifted but are twice-a-year fighters at age 23 with 18 fights. We're not going to see a lot of careers like Canelo.
No.
I mean, forget careers that go to 60 fights. I don't know how many fighters we're going to see with real substantial runs at 40 and 50. We better appreciate what we have in Canelo, because he is one of these guys, regardless of your race, color, creed, religion. When Canelo Alvarez is on that calendar, you circle it with the red ink pen and you say, honey, we're not going out to the in-laws. We're staying home. Post Canelo, I don't know how many more guys are like that anymore.
And what I've always said about Canelo is he's a great champion. He doesn't rest on his laurels. You never see that dude out of shape, get heavy between fights. When he says boxing,
his life,
he
means it.
He's about that life. So he's a kid that other young boxers should look up to, because that's how you carry yourself.
All right, so that's it this Saturday night. Again, T-Mobile Arena on Showtime, pay-per-view. When we come back after this break, we're rejoined by an old friend, Jim Lampley, who'll be live on the scene in Las Vegas. More to come on the 3 Knockdown Rule.
Catch it streaming live right on YouTube.
Welcome to the big leagues, kid.
$1.2 million.
And I'm losing in this fucking game. What the fuck?
There's a 400K flip. If I win by way, you get 10 grand.
Fucking
For my fans.
Tap. Wow. All in the call.
I'm not fucking leaving.
Raise it up.
And we're back on the 3 Knockdown Rule on the UFC Fight Pass. And Mario joining us is a very special friend of the show, past guest, always very popular, and he is missed. Mario, you can do the intro.
Man, someone who I'm proud to call a friend, and who I think is the best broadcaster ever. My guy could make a cockroach race exciting. He is the GOAT, Mr. Jim Lampley. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Mario. Thank you, Steve. My first year at ABC Sports, when I was being brought along through Wide World of Sports wacky events. I believe I might have done a cockroach race, or at least I
And I'm sure you made it totally excited.
on that level. Yeah.
Great.
So this week, starting actually, I believe on Tuesday night when you land in Las Vegas, you will be working for ppv.com. Jim, is this the first boxing event that you've been associated with in any way since HBO signed off in late 2018?
Yeah. According to my memory, this is the very first boxing event I will have attended and been a part of since HBO's last event at StubHub on December 8, 2018.
Wow. And I got to say that the sport has not been the same without you. Not having it on HBO has not been the same. And I know I'm not alone in thinking that. What is your role exactly this upcoming week, Jim?
Well, PPV.com is as far as I know, a relatively new mode of expression, part of the expanding digital and electronic imprint of technology on sports. And it creates an opportunity for consumers, viewers, listeners, fight fans, whatever you want to call them, to interface with the event in a new way. They can be watching Showtime pay-per-view and their broadcast of the fight. They can be listening to Mauro Ranallo and his colleagues. They can, at the same time, if they wish, look at their computer screens and watch live chat digitally typed in by Lance Pugmire and me. They can, if they want, send questions to Lance and me to ask for our answers according to what they want to know about our perceptions of the fight and what's going on. So it's an additional channel, an additional track, if you will, for consumers to use in following the fight, interacting with the fight. And, the special wrinkle, I think, is that they can send us questions and say, hey, what do you think of this? Or even send their own feedback. Why don't you say this? It might make you sound smart. I can imagine all sorts of things that viewer listeners might want to include in their communication with Lance and me.
Fun. That sounds fun. Was it a tough sell for you, Jim? Do you miss boxing?
I miss boxing terribly. You do something for 31 years. You've come immersed in the culture the way that I did during all of those years. Then yes, the ending was so abrupt. I mean, AT&T walked in the door at Time Warner, and 3 or 4 days later, I was learning that we weren't going to be doing unboxing anymore. So obviously, that was a decision that they had set in stone during their acquisition process, and why it was that they didn't want to be involved in boxing anymore, I don't really know. So yeah, I missed it. As you guys probably know, I'm sure you do, I had an agreement not too long after 2019 began. I had an agreement to call a fight for Triller, Teofimo Lopez's rematch with George Kambosos. His first fight with George Kambosos after Lopez had gotten the upset win over Vasily Lomachenko. And I think it was Teofimo who came down with COVID, and the fight was canceled. And so that went out the window. The next thing they wanted me to do was to go to Miami to do Evander Holyfield versus an MMA fighter. Unlike a lot of you guys, a lot of other people who are my colleagues in boxing, unlike Max Kellerman in particular, I'm not an MMA fan, and I've never paid a lot of attention to it. I don't know much of anything about it. I didn't feel qualified to go down to Miami and talk about Belfort versus Holyfield, so I turned that one down. I had heard lots of rumors and sort of whispers that I would be getting an offer from a streaming service or a cable network to take the blow-by-blow job and go forward, but that didn't happen. So I've been on the sidelines watching boxing and caring about boxing, still passionately as a consumer, but without being in a position to talk about it, write about it, or otherwise communicate.
Jimmy, you've had such an illustrious career. I mean, you've called everything, and this is literally the truth. I'm just telling you, I first saw Jim Lampley in the early to mid 80s during the college halftime shows of college football, back when you had to literally watch Jim to get every score. It was a lot different back then, and that's when I first saw this guy right here, who ended up becoming a friend. And you've done the Olympics. You've done every single major big event, in my view.
Tennis, a lot of tennis.
Yeah. So, Jim, when it comes down to it, though, are you mostly known or best known, you think, your signature sport, is it boxing?
I went to 14 Olympics, which is more than any other American sports broadcaster, or at least that was the case when I went to my last one in Beijing in 2008. Maybe somebody has sneaked past me since then, but I think I would know that. And I have not been notified to that effect. So whether I'm wrong or I'm right, I'm still walking around saying I went to 14 Olympics more than any other American sports broadcaster. And obviously, those were large audiences, and I was on camera because at 8 of them, I was a studio host. I was the first person to have to stand on the sideline of a college football game with a camera and a microphone. I was the guinea pig who authored and introduced that particular role. I did NFL games. As Mario points out, I did Wimbledon tennis for 12 years on HBO, 6 hours a day live, no commercials. Sometimes 6 hours a day live, no commercials, no tennis. And those were amazing. Martina Navratilova, Arthur Ashe, Billie Jean King, John Lloyd, great lineup of expert commentators. Thank God for them on the rain days when there was no tennis. But at the end of the day, the very first live sports event my mother ever sat me down to watch on television in 1955 was Sugar Ray Robinson versus Bobo Olson, their second fight for the middleweight championship of the world. My very first legitimate full-blown sports hero was Cassius Marcellus Clay. And boxing has always been extremely close to my heart and very personal for me. So if you were to say, and I think a lot of people would, well, you're better known for boxing than for anything else, that's great. I'm thrilled with that. I care about it. I'm passionate about it. I learned a lot about it over the years. And yes, I think that boxing is as meaningful to my identity as any of the other things I had the privilege of doing.
You know, Jim, it's obvious you still have a great passion for the sport and you're still a fan. How much of it do you follow? And given the rise of so many streaming services and platforms, because it used to be so easy, it was either HBO or Showtime, right? Now there's a plethora of them. Do you find the sport more difficult to follow? And how much of it do you actually consume on a weekly basis?
Well, I read the blogs that are important to read. I get a transcript or a feed of you guys and your podcast. I have a variety of outlets and exposures that help to keep me somewhat up to speed in the sport. It's not like it used to be. And the reason it's not like it used to be is because, of course, when I was calling fights on HBO, we would go into a hotel conference room the day before the fights and bring in the fighters from every fight we were going to show. If it was a pay-per-view, we were showing 4 or 5 fights. If it was a standard HBO broadcast of a big-time championship fight, we were usually showing 4 or 5 fights, or a doubleheader on a standard Saturday night broadcast. And we would sit down with the fighters and talk to them face-to-face for 15 minutes, 30 minutes for the main event fighters. And so I had this unique opportunity to get to know the fighters on a personal level. There was nothing else in the world like that. There were few things I did in sports, all the other sports that equaled that for the amount of human preparation and inside knowledge. You know, I had a lot of friends who would trek up to Vegas from Southern California when I was living in LA, living in San Diego. And of course, the big thing they always wanted to know when they came to town was who's going to win the fight, because they were going to go back, right? You know, tell me who's going to win the fight. And I would always say to them, I'm going to sit down with these guys for 30 minutes each on Friday. And I'm going to look into their eyes from across a conference room table. I'm going to listen to the answers to their questions. I'm going to see their body language. If you want me to give you a tip on who's going to win the fight, wait until all of that is done. Because once that's done, I'm usually 90% sure. Before that, it might be 50-50. But you almost, it's so personal. It's so intimate. You have to hear them talk about themselves before you really have a strong idea as to what's going to happen in the fight.
Well, now I regret not hitting you up more, Jim, prior.
Yeah, exactly.
Boski, insider trader.
You've already got enough money, Mario. I would have seen it.
Looking back, though, honestly, and maybe I'm just a prisoner of the moment of growing up, but honestly, I think HBO boxing is so desperately missed. The golden era, hearing you and Larry Merchant and Harold Letterman, all the guys. God, it was just the best. And it was such a classy, beautiful production of the sport seen at the highest level. It is such a shame it is not there. Never say never. They may, you never know. I'm the eternal optimist. They may want to revisit it. But in talking about and taking a look back, Jim, can you give me just a couple moments of the time at times that surprised you the most in certain outcomes, particular events, certain things that doing it in 30 years, I'm sure just when you thought you've seen it all, something must have happened that just blew you away.
Mario, I've probably told you this story before, but I was growing up in Hendersonville, North Carolina. That's where my mother sat me down at age 6 to watch Bubba Olson versus Sugar Ray Robinson for the middleweight championship. Eventually, she had to leave tiny Hendersonville, North Carolina. She was a double widow, raising 2 boys, had to make money. She went to Miami to try to learn how to sell life insurance. And it was there in Miami when I was 14 years old, when I saved lawn mowing and car washing money for months to buy a ticket that in my memory was maybe $100. It might have been $150. I don't know. I didn't save the ticket. I wish I had. It would be worth millions now. But the very first live prize fight I ever saw was Sonny Liston versus Cassius Clay, February 25, 64, Miami Beach Convention Center for the heavyweight championship of the world.
Oh, man.
Fast forward 26 years to a morning in Tokyo, 11:30 in the morning, Korakuen Stadium in Tokyo. And I was sitting at ringside as the ringside blow-by-blow voice for the fight, which is going to supplant that one as the biggest upset in boxing history. And it was shocking to me. It was like an out-of-body experience to realize in the late rounds, as the outcome became abundantly clear. Even before it happened, I was thinking, oh my gosh, the very first live prize fight I ever saw was the biggest upset in the history of boxing. And now I am calling for the American audience, the fight which will succeed it, as the biggest upset in the history of boxing. And when Douglas floored Tyson in the 10th round, and the referee was standing over Mike, and you'll recall the amazing pictures captured by a great ringside cameraman named Roy Sager of Mike reaching and floundering with his glove, trying to pick up the mouthpiece to put back into his mouth. And I'm watching that and thinking to myself, oh my gosh, what do I say about this? What is the right call? And I was already in the early stages of developing a friendship with the greatest actor of my generation, a man named Jack Nicholson. I had once asked Nicholson, what is it you try to keep in your mind? What's your mantra when you go to the set to do what you know is the pivotal scene in the movie? He said, Lamp, same thing I've said to myself from the first moment I started doing this. Don't overact. And as I tried to conjure a line for what was happening in Tyson Douglas, I heard his voice. Don't overact. And that's how I got to Mike Tyson has been knocked out. That's all. Mike Tyson has been knocked out.
Direct, one of the greatest calls.
So appreciate that story, Jim. That is an incredible story. And coincidentally, correct me if I'm wrong, just about 5 or 6 weeks later, you called one of my all-time favorite fights with Chavez Taylor, March 17th, 1990, Las Vegas Hilton with Chavez. Man, what a 2 month span with Tyson and Douglas, and then Chavez and Taylor. What a great year.
And I overtalked Chavez Taylor. I was hyper. It was an amazing and in some ways complex story. And looking back at it, unlike Tyson Douglas, I don't love the call because I tried to say everything all at once about it, and I believe I overtalked it. That was also true of the finish of Oscar De La Hoya against Fernando Vargas, when I got excited about all the emotional implications and the personal confrontation involved in that. And even though there are boxing fans who will come up to me on the street or in a shopping center and quote me every word of what I said at the end of De La Hoya versus Vargas, I did not love it. I loved Mike Tyson has been knocked out, and I loved it happened. It happened.
That's what I was going to say next. That's funny that you say that. Yeah, first of all, I think you're being meticulous, a little too hard on yourselves, because those were great calls, because as a fan, I can appreciate and remember vividly what happened. But when George Foreman knocked out Michael Moore, I'll never forget that. When you took the pause, it happened. It happened.
Well,
Jesus, that was fantastic.
You know, Jim, you talk about the Tyson Douglas thing. I had lunch with your old friend, Larry Merchant, on Friday, and I still remember that line. He said, "This makes Cinderella look like a sad story." And I've always said that's the RFK assassination fight, because everybody knows where they were, where they either saw the fight or heard about Mike Tyson getting knocked out. Jimmy, the highest compliment that I could pay HBO, in addition to what Mario stated earlier, there are still days I'll go on YouTube and there's nothing on, or I have some free time. I'll go back to your pre-fight vignettes you used to do, and stuff like Legendary Nights.
Legendary Nights was
classic.
The one Chavez Taylor one we just did was excellent. They were so good, and the storytelling was so good. I mean, man, just the landscape of boxing and in general. And I don't know if I'm sounding like the old guy right now, but
we are.
Well, it was just so good though back then, and it's sorely missed.
Another actor friendship going back 7 years, when James Franco was coming up and making his name for himself. We buddied up in Hollywood and were spending time together. And he called me one day and said, I'm about to be involved in a boxing movie. Can you help me with some material so I can learn more and get more of a perspective about what boxing is all about? And I said, James, I'm going to send you my copy of the Legendary Nights episode on Meldrick Taylor versus Julio Cesar Chavez. And I'm not going to send you anything else, because everything you need to learn about boxing, you will learn from that particular show. It was definitely the best of the Legendary Nights episodes, although there were a lot of really good ones.
Well, that one was it was incredibly poignant. I throw it on every once in a while and just show my friends, or my dad and I will watch it. It really was.
The way it ends with Meldrick staring into the camera. Yes. You know the way it ended.
And then the way what becomes of it. Oh, man.
No, but the Hagler Hearns episode, obviously, with my affinity for Hagler, is my favorite. It's inspiring. Just the music they have and the arc of the stories. Jim, this is interesting. You were on the scene when a young Saul Alvarez first came to America. He was kind of like this novelty, this redheaded Mexican with freckles, doesn't look like a normal Mexican. There is such a curiosity about him. And when you're doing his fights, when he won his first world title against Matthew Hatton at the Anaheim Pond, fast forward to now, did you think it would become all of this?
Well, I was trying to develop a drama project relative to a Mexican-American fighter at that time. And I was working with a Mexican screenwriter, a great Mexican screenwriter named Guillermo Arriaga. He won the Academy Award for writing Battle. He had several other amazing screenplays. And I remember him telling me it will be extremely difficult, regardless of how good he is, for Canelo Alvarez to become the biggest star in Mexican boxing. And I said, why? Why, Guillermo? He has to win the fights, right? No, there's more to it than that. He is not from Sinaloa. He is not from Mexico City. He is not from Tijuana. He is from what seems to most Mexicans to be an exotic and privileged place. He's from the Yucatan. He has pale skin and red hair. This will be an uphill fight for him. Oh, by the way, he was originally the television darling product
of a network named Televisa, which for whatever reason wasn't popular among the great mass of Mexican consumers. So that operated against him as well. Well, look at him now. And despite the loss to Bivol, certainly before the loss to Bivol, if you were pinned down and had to choose who's the greatest fighter in Mexican history, do you really think that Chavez's record or Salvador Sanchez, who died young, did they have more points on the board than Canelo? Or does Canelo have the most points on the board of any Mexican fighter ever? There's an argument there to be made.
An argument? Yes.
So it's an interesting position that he's now in, because the Bivol matchup was a matchmaking error. I don't know whether somebody advised him incorrectly or whether he was the one who made that choice. Maybe I'll learn more about it this coming weekend. But, you needed only to watch the first couple of rounds to see, this was a bridge too far. It may not have robbed him of all of his cachet, but a little. So what's left now? He's still the number one dollar for dollar attraction in boxing. He's made sums of money far beyond what he might have dreamed of as a boy. He's bought a lot of beautiful horses. He has bought beautiful ranches in Yucatan. He's been celebrated, wined and dined by the most exalted upper crust of Mexican society. What's left? I think what's left is to try to reach back to number one pound for pound. He was number one pound for pound, and he fought Bivol. Now, I think you and I will agree, both of you guys, that number one pound for pound goes through Omaha, Nebraska, goes through a very dark-hearted, mean-spirited killer fighter named Terrence Crawford. And yes, there's a 21-pound weight difference at this moment, but I'm sure Crawford is willing to close some of that gap. He might only need Canelo to close a little bit of it to get to the point where they can get together and make an overwhelming sum of money. And if Canelo could win that fight, he'd be back to number one pound for pound. I think that's the logical target, the logical goal for Canelo coming into this fight, and he has to be careful not to look past this one, because this is a dangerous matchup too.
I agree with you, and I will add that another classic fight that you called, and I can compare, speaking of a fighter jumping up in weight classes, when Pacquiao fought De La Hoya, going into it, Jim, did you expect that outcome? I don't think I've ever asked you.
I did not expect Oscar to win the fight. I expected him to be a great deal more competitive than he was. Smart people whom I respected in the sport had told me that he ought to be much more competitive than he was. And now, looking back and having watched the De La Hoya documentary project, which, by the way, I thought was extremely revealing and very watchable, I think I understand a lot of what happened and how a lot of his competitive spirit and intelligence about competition by that point had been given away to the other problems in his life. So I was surprised that it wasn't closer than it was, but it didn't shock me that Pacquiao was able to win the fight.
Well, Jim, another fighter that ended up being, I think, an all-time great and a generational talent that you were able to kind of see from the genesis of it, Terrence Crawford, you just mentioned him. Did it surprise you how lopsided his fight with Errol Spence was in the summer?
No. And even though that sounds like a self-congratulatory thing to say, you can go find a Tom Hauser article from the Monday following the fight in which Hauser said most experts going into the fight called it a pick'em fight. The one who didn't was Jim Lampley. And he quoted me as saying that I thought that Crawford might very well need, that Spence might very well need a rescue late in the fight. And he did get a rescue late in the fight. And I saw that coming because, again, what did I call Crawford? A dark-hearted, mean-spirited, competitive fighter.
Yep.
He has the best killer instinct in boxing.
Yep.
He knows exactly how to put the hammer down when he wants to put the hammer down. He's ambidextrous. He has an in this era, he has a unique ability to balance himself prior to a counterpunch in such a way that he can deliver a counterpunch with maximum power. The target is never more vulnerable than when he's being countered, and he has gone forward with his weight to try to land a punch, and that's when Terrence catches you and turns you inside out. And those are devastatingly powerful counter shots. And I think that Spence was shocked. I don't know if the people in his corner were shocked. I was not shocked. I've seen Crawford do that to other people as well.
I agree with you. I called Crawford from the beginning. I'll be honest, I thought it would be much more competitive, but I thought Crawford, I always thought was going to be a victor at that fight. Hypothetical matchup down the line. I know we have to see how Canelo and Charlo play out. But if Crawford and Canelo were to come to fruition, you see that being competitive still, even with the 21-pound difference, Jim?
Well, first, it's a fascinating bargaining process, okay? Because they're both going to make tons and tons of money. The bargaining process is about the weight. If I'm Crawford, I don't want to have to go up to 168 pounds to get the fight. I want to somehow gull Canelo into thinking that it's okay to fight him at, best of all possible worlds, 154, or at the very worst, I'll go to 160. But if I'm Terrence Crawford, I want to try to make clear that there's no way you're going to get me to come into the ring at 168. That's your game, not mine. If Crawford is able to get Canelo down to 160, and some of this depends on what I see out of Canelo this weekend.
Right.
But let's say he has a good fight, not a great fight, and he wins. If Crawford can get him down to 160, I make it a pick-em fight. If Crawford can get him down to 154 or 157, Crawford is, in my view, a big favorite in the fight. 168, I still have to favor Canelo.
Well, okay, so obviously he gives him much more of a shot than you do, Mario, because you think it's I don't say physical mismatch. You think that's a lot to bite off for Crawford.
All I know is this. I've seen Canelo get hit by Gennady Golovkin, flush on the chin,
cold ball
big punchers. Crawford's not going to, I think Canelo's going to walk through those punches. Honestly, he's not going to all of a sudden gain he's not going to be stronger than Triple G. And I haven't seen Crawford face anyone with the power of like a Canelo, and I think that's going to be the difference down the line.
Jim, quick question. Let's say Crawford does the unthinkable and wins the fight. Let's say they come to an agreement at a catch weight. Does Crawford all of a sudden start to mention all-time great status? I'm talking like top 15-ish, maybe.
People ask me, who does he remind you of? And remember where my boxing education began. And, I hear people say, okay, he reminds me of Ray Leonard. No, he doesn't have that kind of footwork and maneuverability. He doesn't have the showmanship. He's not Ray Leonard. Well, he reminds me of Tommy Hearns. No, he's not long and a hard-throwing, far-reaching puncher like those guys. So who's he like? He's like Ray Robinson. He has a 50s mentality. He's a hard guy. He's somebody you don't want to see in a dark alley. And I think, again, counterpunching with balance, timing, and power, to me, he's the latter-day Sugar Ray Robinson. And that's part of why I thought he would easily put Spence away.
I love me some Crawford for the reasons you mentioned, and it makes adjustments beautifully, ambidextrous, that mean-spirited, such a closer. Again, playing this hypothetical matchup. Prime Crawford. What is Prime Crawford? Are we in Prime Crawford right now? Prime Crawford 140. That's something that we discussed. But let's assume Prime Crawford, whatever that weight is. Mayweather at 47. Who do you like, Jim?
Mayweather. And I think that's because Crawford's an offensive fighter and does want to entertain the audience. I still haven't seen the fighter that I think would beat Floyd Mayweather, because Floyd Mayweather didn't give a happy damn about entertaining the audience. He was only there to win the fight, and if he had to take all the air out of the balloon to do it, he was going to do it. He did not mind being disapproved of. How could he get away with that? He was the first great social media genius. He was the first person to realize that there's a constituency out there in the social media audience who will love you for being mean-spirited, for being belittling to the consumer, et cetera, who will love you for insulting people left and right. Floyd showed a particular politician that you could do that and get away with it.
Well, you know what? This is going to surprise you, but Mario, Jim, at 47, I saw Floyd Mayweather get absolute help from Marcos Maidana. I've always thought the best version of Mayweather was 30 to 35. At 47, agree or disagree? I kind of like Bud Crawford in that fight. What about you?
Well, listen, I'm not going to disagree with you. I think of myself as one of the world's biggest Crawford fans. I just think that it's very hard to beat a guy who doesn't care what the fight looks like.
Mario?
I go with Crawford at 47, and I agree with you. The most dangerous Mayweather, I think, was at lightweight, only because I think he's got heavier hands. The way he is able to make adjustments and his ambidextrous style. Right. I think he'll still look, like you said, if you were to look at comment, I don't think Maidana has as much success as he does with like a Crawford.
Exactly. Maybe not even a Jose Luis Castillo.
No, Jose Luis Castillo. By the way, which I still think he won.
First fight,
I still think he won that first one.
Yeah.
So was it that Maidana one was close. So, I haven't seen Crawford in trouble.
Right.
And I haven't seen Crawford even hurt or in a close fight. So if you really start to think about it, you know what I'm saying?
It's not far-fetched.
It's not far-fetched.
Jim, quick question as we wind it down with you. Who are the fighters today that you say, you know what, honey? I'm going to watch him tonight. Don't make any plans. Like, who excites you?
Terrence Crawford. I mean, that Inouye is in that class. Mm-hmm. I want to see Inouye just because of the spectacular talent. But for the mentality, for the fighter in him, Terrence Crawford. And by the way, Canelo because his career is historic. Canelo because he's fighting to try to go out as the greatest Mexican fighter of all time. Mm-hmm. And it's an extremely exalted reputation in the sport. But it's endangered right now. If he loses to Jermell Charlo, he's taken one more bat against being able to make that claim.
Last question. I could talk to you all night here, Jim. Someone who you've called, whose career you've called since he made his debut here in the States, who I consider, he's in my top 5 greatest fighters, believe it or not, Manny Pacquiao. Okay, I really do. And I'll tell you why I do that. Because I seen him all the time. So when he's this big, he's a slight guy. And the fact that he should have really been a lightweight his whole career. And he essentially fought all his big money fights at welterweight. And he's a little guy. And he went to the fire. Marquez was a bad matchup for him. The guy, he fought him 4 times. Morales 3 times. Pereira, he fought a who's who of Hall of Fame. Because in the way and in the fashion, there was a run there where he was just murdering
Hodo, Hatton, De La Hoya,
murdering these guys. And again, way out, he's fighting 2-3 weight classes out of what's supposed to be his natural weight class, but because of their money fights, and he looks incredible doing it. Where do you rank him as far as your all-time greats? Does he even make the list?
Well, he's definitely one of the top 5 most entertaining fighters of all time.
Entertaining, but I didn't even use 2. I didn't
entertaining.
Exactly.
Entertaining because he would hit and get hit. Okay, and in order to be spectacularly entertaining, think Arturo Gatti. You've got to be willing to hit and get hit. So he's one of the top 5 of all time in that regard. And 122 up to 135, best I ever saw. But I didn't see Henry Armstrong, so I can't put him up against the all-time best in that particular weight area. But he was a monstrous talent, and never forget. And I'm sure that Larry has told you the story. We went to South Africa to do Lennox Lewis against Asim Rahman. We saw a guy on the undercard named Lesinola Ledwaba. Ledwaba won the 122-pound world championship. And Larry and I are both absolutely convinced this guy has to be the greatest 122-pound fighter in the world. Look at the style, the balance, the timing, all of the boxing skill. And Pacquiao was like a bottom-of-the-barrel opponent for Lesinola Ledwaba.
I remember you mispronounced his name when he beat. I remember that because nobody knew about it.
Late replacement, and they went down the IBF ratings because Enrique Sanchez pulls out with an injury. So the IBF, Murad Muhammad actually did a good thing. He said to everybody who wants this fight, and Manny Pacquiao, in like a month's notice, said, I'm right here. and he fought him on the De La Hoya Javier Castillejo undercard. And I remember, Jim, everyone thought, who's this little guy? He just stole the show.
Well, Top Rank's matchmakers. And how did Terrence Crawford see the light of day? Terrence Crawford was a last-minute throw-in against Greatest Prescott on the undercard of a Vegas pay-per-view at a moment when Prescott was expected to, easily rise up toward the 135-pound championship of the world. And Tim Bradley told Brad Goodman and the other matchmaker at Top Rank, put this sparring partner of mine in against him. He'll beat him. And sure enough, Terrence won every round from Greatest Prescott and went on to become Terrence Crawford.
Jim, final question as we wrap it up here. I know fans want to know, and I'm always curious, how's life in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, for you? What are you doing?
It'd be a lot better if Hubert Davis can crack the code and learn how to use his moving parts, or maybe the new point guard Elliot Cadeau is going to become the de facto coach, and they will again become a great team with the current crop of transfer shooters. Last year's transfer shooters didn't do the job. But in the meantime, we're watching Drake May. And I hope you guys saw Drake May's left-handed touchdown pass Saturday night.
I did.
He's magical. He's a spectacular player who is likely to have a long and spectacular career in front of him. And he's a great kid. And I came back to the place I most love on the planet to teach a graduate school course and to go to football and basketball games with the chancellor, who's my best friend, with whom I share a birthday. And it's everything I dreamed it would be. And I didn't even know before I came that we would have Drake May.
That's awesome.
Jim, we look forward to your ongoing coverage this week on ppv.com. Make sure you order it. And also our good friend Lance Pugmire will be on the scene for the LA Times. Jim, you are always invited to the 3 Knockdown Rule. Please join us again soon.
I will, whenever you want me to do it. I'll talk to you later.
Great talking to you, bud. You're the best.
All right. Thanks to the legend, Jim Lampley. We'll be back. We wrap it up here on the 3 Knockdown Rule. And we are back on the 3 Knockdown Rule. We just want to let everyone know, if you'd like to get involved with the 3 Knockdown Rule and sponsor our show, we still have some slots available. Please reach out to us by emailing info@boxbid.io. Once again, that's info@boxbid.io. Boxbid.io is an online platform that is launching soon that helps build public figures and professionals in the world of boxing get sponsorships. We are proudly working with Boxbid.io. Mario, like a football coach, I just threw out the game plan. I said, you know what, let give Lampley the ball.
Dude, I wish I didn't have to go pick up my kids right now, or else I'd say, let's just keep talking.
You call him an Uber. Want to call him an Uber?
Yeah, my 10-year-old. Hey, get an Uber.
Get an Uber. Don't worry, I got the tip.
He's great, man. We have to have him back.
Yes, and
we can stroll down so many great fights and memory lanes. The dude's memory is insane.
Encyclopedic. By the way, like I said, I had lunch with Larry Merchant on Friday at the Water Grill. We do that once a month.
We got to get him on.
Yes, and I said to him, "What'd you think of Crawford Spence?" And the way he can say it was a conclusive, dominant performance. And the way he said, you're like, this needs to be on the air.
He still got it.
So anyway, we'd like to thank everyone that made this show possible on behalf of Mario Lopez, Smoking Tim Frazier, and Tino on the edits. Goodbye, everybody.